Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NCDIT's Division of Broadband and Digital Opportunities Completing Access to Broadband webinar. My name is Crystal Dickerson. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for the division. I'm joined here by many of my talented colleagues who will be providing information on what the pre-qualified internet service providers need to know about this round of CAB. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. We are recording this webinar. If you do have questions, please put them in the chat. We will try to address them at the end. We do have a lot of content to get through, though. So if we are not able to get to all of the questions, we will consolidate those into some FAQs and add those to the website next week. Thank you again. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Angie Bailey.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you all for attending this morning. Good morning. I know this is our first week back for many folks, our first full week back from the holidays. I think people are preparing for winter weather, probably as your companies and personally. And we know there's a lot happening, so we appreciate you taking this 45 minutes to be with us. I don't think we had a CAB webinar last time in the spring when we did, we rolled out round one of CAB, but there's been so much happening and some changes with CAB. And so our main goal is we want to be positive that y'all are clear on how to apply and especially what changes have been made since last round. So again, this session is for the pre-qualified broadband providers for CAB and hopefully y'all are planning to apply for our open window. All right, next slide, please, Crystal. And I'm joined today with Gretchen Ramirez and Shannon Gerger from the Broadband Infrastructure Office. I'm, of course, Angie Bailey from Broadband Infrastructure Office. And we also have Ben Shelton from the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis, which is our mapping partner. And Creasy Johnson is on as well, our general counsel. So goals for today is basically to catch you up on what's been happening with CAB and make sure you're clear on everything. We're going to review some highlights and status of the CAB program right now. We're going to provide an update on Session Law 2024-55, passed in November. We're going to review quickly some pieces of the application process, where we are with mapping data, the timeline for awards. We're going to touch on the end date for construction period and see what questions you all have. If we don't get to all the questions, we are planning to post an FAQ next week. So we may take some of them that way and post them. But that's our goal for today. Next slide. So again, as you all know, Completing Access to Broadband, it's our largest ARPA program in terms of funding. The American Rescue Plan Act funds $400 million pot. And it's a partnership with counties and obviously our broadband providers across the state. We've awarded $118 million in CAB to date. And so that was about $23 million from our, what we call Great to CAB projects, which were unfunded GREAT grants when we were rolling out GREAT. And then we awarded another 91 million in the spring round of CAB. And so we're excited, but we want to get the rest of the money moving and out. We do have scopes of work for 90 counties posted right now. And so this is what we call CAB round 2. And that's what we're covering today, and a little bit on round 1 updates. Next slide, please. So again, these are reminders. I think you all know all this, but we just want to be just reminders because you all have a lot going on. There's 41 pre-qualified broadband providers for the CAB program. Again, this is the preface of CAB is that it's a partnership with counties to mutually identify areas that need access and work with them on finalizing a scope of work for their individual county. So we post the scopes online to solicit proposals. And so the link is here. Hopefully you all have already looked at the 90 that are out there. It is different from GREAT. It's a procurement. It is a best value procurement. So the evaluation criteria are listed in the scope of work. They're the same for all 90. Well, mostly the same. And again, best value is selection of a contractor based on a determination of which proposal offers the best trade-off between price and performance, where quality is considered an integral performance factor, not just the lowest bid. And again, providers are agreeing to provide at least 100 megs down, 100 megs up to specific broadband serviceable locations. Next slide. And so just to kind of touch on what's happened since last round one. As you all know, you all remember last year we sought removal of the county match requirement. Counties were saying they didn't have enough ARPA funds or other general funds to provide the match required for CAB. We can't roll out CAB without, based on that legislation, without the county match. So there were some changes introduced in June. Those didn't pass, but we kind of knew that the legislature was looking at that change. We did look at, oh, Chris is just asking if people can see the slides. I hope y'all can see them. Okay, good. So that didn't pass. So we were kind of exploring how can we keep CAB moving if counties are saying they don't have the match requirement. We did look at it using stopgap solution funds for county CAB match. And so that was kind of last summer. But then in September, House Bill 10 was introduced that had the CAB language in it, and then that passed in November 20th. And so we go through all that to kind of say this is why CAB was on hold essentially between summer and through the end of the year. We needed to have clear legislation and also to make sure you know that stopgap solutions, we do not plan to use that for county CAB match now. So that is just make sure that you read the scopes carefully, and this money is not coming from stopgap. So what happened when that passed November 20th? We're preparing for that. The impacts to round one of CAB, which again was a spring 2024 session, it's 2024 round. That allowed us as NCDIT to provide the county project cost responsibility for those projects. And so we have refunded those county contributions and terminated those MOUs with the counties. And you all should be watching. We will plan to do a contract amendment for those round one projects, but none of that should impact your role for those of you that have round one CAB awards, but we want you to understand what changed. Next slide. And so Session Law 2024-55 impacts to CAB program round two. So that legislation removed the county match requirement effective July 1, 2024. And it applies to grant funding requests submitted after that time. And the legislation basically said that a provider shall provide at least 30% of the total estimated project cost. But just read your scopes of work carefully. What we have in there is that NCDIT will provide 70% of the match, and the broadband provider will provide 30%. And so the rationale is that the match requirement is not part of the evaluation criteria for this particular program and this particular round. It looks like we still have a few folks that can't see them. The slides.
If you cannot see the slides, please try rejoining. We also will be placing a recording of these slides online afterward. I'm trying to work with tech support to see if there's anything we can do to get you in and viewing at this moment, but we are working on it at the moment. Thank you.
Apologize that some folks are having trouble. I'll try to be specific in what I say. So again, the match requirement for this round of CAB for almost all the counties except 3, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, is that DIT is providing 70%. Broadband provider has to provide 30%. And then there are 7 counties, to make it more complex, there are 7 counties that are putting money into round 2 that made that choice, and that just increases the 70%. So that's how we're handling that. Next slide, please. And then again, and I know this gets complicated, that's why we wanted to have this session. So there are 3 counties. So in this session law, it talks about 37 counties that were participating and had committed to participate in round 1. And so some of those there were 4 that submitted a funding request that didn't end up with a contracted project for different reasons. Some it was timing, some we made an award, a provider withdrew. It's a little different for each. But because those counties were part of the round 1 process, those specific counties that are participating this time, Henderson, Macon, Nash, have a different match requirement in their scopes. So their requirements are based on the original CAB legislation. So please look at those three carefully. We wanted to call them out in the session to make sure that y'all are reading the difference with those. So that's, again, Henderson, Macon, Nash, their match requirements are slightly different. So please look at that carefully in the scope. Next slide. Okay, so legislation passed November 20th, and this is kind of how we've gotten to where we are now on January 10th. We had 91 counties that had requested to participate in CAB. We distributed a draft scope of work to counties on November 15th, anticipating that this legislation would be finalized. It passed. We posted 53 scopes of work on November 26th, along with a list of the 91 counties. One county then actually withdrew, so we actually have 90 now. We posted 37 remaining scopes on December 10th. A lot of those were round one counties. We had to kind of talk through their refund of their county funds before we could get their scopes finalized. The protest process began on December 2nd with that list of 91 counties. The CAB planning tool has been available. And so we started that protest process. It ended at 11:59 on December 13th. And again, that is the protest process for CAB is if a provider says that they serve a location that shows as being unserved in the CAB eligible locations map. That window closed. We did realize that there was 3,592 broadband serviceable locations that had been protested in round one of CAB that were still showing as unserved in the new FCC broadband data, which came out in November. And so we did open the window again from December 31st to 11:59 tonight to run protests on those, potential protests on those, or allow for potential protests on those 3,592 locations. So I know that's a lot, but again, we want to make sure that you all understand kind of our processes, and if you have questions, send them in. We will get them answered. That ends tonight, and so our goal is to publish the final CAB eligible locations on Monday or Tuesday, depending on how many protests we receive by tonight. Just so y'all are aware, the map that's up there now and has been up for the past couple of weeks does have updated information based on protests that we've resolved. And we are still sending out protest notifications. If you have not gotten one on a protest you submitted, you will probably get it today. So that's quickly kind of how we got from mid-November until now. And it's a lot, but we're excited to finally have all these out and get the map finalized and let you all dig in. And so I'm sorry, we're not, I was looking at the questions, but we said we wait till the end. So that was stay focused. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gretchen Ramirez, who's going to talk a little bit about some highlights of the application process.
Thank you, Angie. So the application process for this particular round of CAB is different than it was in the past. What we did was we went ahead and just kind of split it. We realized there was a lot of information in our response form that just had to do with the company, so with your organization, and we kind of call that a company profile. And then the other items were related specifically to projects. So to keep from having to, send something in over and over and over again, and then also for us to have to review it over and over and over again, just to kind of streamline it. Since there are so many counties involved, we wanted to make sure that we split it up. So the first piece of it is the response form A. It's the company profile. It's kind of like a packet. It includes the BIRD anti-lobbying certification, no overdue tax debt certification, and then the updated company financial information. This is due January 21st. Without this particular packet that includes that response form A, we wouldn't be able to allow participation in CAB. So please, 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 I cannot say enough. Make sure we get all of this information to us by January 21st. It's submitted one time. It is not submitted with each project. It is just submitted this one time. and we're submitting it, having you submit it through the NC Bio Data Exchange. That's the same place that you were doing some of your mapping things with. We've used it for other things in CAB, and we're also using it for B pre-qualification. So you might hear the name over and over again. It's the same space. If you need your credentials, let us know. So you just have to email broadband mapping email, and we'll get the credentials to you. We can even stop and show you how to use it if you're having problems. We just want to make sure that everybody has access, that they know what to do, and we receive these packets. The second piece of it is response form B. So these are individual projects. So if you decide you want to do a project in 5 different counties, you would submit 5 different response form B packets, and they would be through the EBS system, something that everybody is familiar with from the last iteration. So EBS is our system that we use for grant management. It's here as well. On these particular slides, these things are linked. So at the top, pre-qualified vendors, and then it's the same application documents are available at the bottom. It's linked all over the place. We want to make sure everybody can see everything since this is so different. The submissions for the project proposals, all of them, so all counties, are due February 17th. And you have to submit that form, your executed scope of work, which includes signatures, not just the signature page, I'm sorry, the whole thing, because we want to make sure it's executed. Mapping documents that are detailed on the website, the budget for the project proposal, and then the key personnel list. The key personnel list might be the same over and over again, but there are some providers that specifically use key personnel for each county that they're applying in. And we can go to the next slide. So this particular slide, it just has screenshots of the application. So like the data exchange, sorry, the application portals. So the data exchange is on the left. This is just kind of an overview. These instructions, if you click on the link, I know we're in a webinar, but if you see the slides, it will take you to an instruction sheet, and it just tells you how to get into your particular folder in the exchange, so you can upload your documents for the response form A packet. And then on the right-hand side of the screen is just some screenshots about EBS. So in EBS, just like we did last time, it's set up with CAB, SOW, the county name. Last iteration, it was -01. These are -02. So you want to make sure that when you are looking for the projects you want to do the proposals on, that your particular thing in EBS says 02 at the end. And if you have any questions about this as you're uploading your proposal packets, let us know. We can walk through, we can screen share and kind of show what we're looking at. But the programs are labeled 02 for this iteration, not 01. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to Ben.
All right, thanks, Gretchen. So this slide is just kind of showing a screenshot of our CAB planning tool that we used for round 1. We did update it into a kind of a new interface, but it is the same content. So for round 2, we have this new CAB planning tool, has the same functionality that allows you to visualize areas in the state and in each county that are eligible for the program. This data has been updated for the result of the main protest period. But like Angie said, we have a smaller group of locations that are going through an additional protest period that ends today. We hope to have this map and the data behind it all updated early next week. And I'll on the next slide, I'll show you where you can check to see when we have that updated. We'll have a date posted. But using this tool, you can see the different hex bins. These are areas that contain eligible locations. The darker shades of pink in this map show like a higher concentration of locations or a count in that hex bin of eligible locations. The darker shades of blue show higher percentages of all locations in that hex bin that are eligible. So you combine those two colors and you get the darker purples. So that shows higher counts and higher percentages in that area. It really kind of drives you to different concentrations of eligible locations in the state. So the darker the colors, the more locations you're going to find that are eligible in those areas. And as you scale in, it has different scales of hex bins, so they get more granular as you scale in. And if you go all the way down to a street level, you should see the points show up that show the actual eligible locations and served locations and all the different status for every location in the state. And quickly, if you see the bottom left number, 167,907, that is the number of eligible locations for this round of CAB across the entire state. If you filter in the top right by a county, you'll see that number change. So you can kind of get a glimpse of how many locations in each county there are that are eligible. Next slide, please. And on the right hand side of this slide, you'll see the CAB planning tool on our NC1 map broadband page. If you hit the view button, that takes you to that map that was showing in the last slide. But if you select the data button in that card, that will take you to all the data sources that were in that map. And this includes our CAB eligible locations table download that's kind of shown here in this slide. Using this download interface, you can filter by county. There's that little green box in the middle. There's a filter button and a download button there. If you filter by county first, you can then toggle the filter on in this download menu and only download the locations for the county that you're interested in. There is I like to call out, there's a new option to request a new file. So basically that will, if you've downloaded that county previously or downloaded the data previously for the whole state, you want to make sure you click that request new file. That'll clear your browser cache. Make sure you're getting the latest data from our server. Without doing that, you might accidentally just download a previous version that you had downloaded, before. So we want to make sure that request new file option. Or if you go all the way to the bottom, you can always just download the entire state of eligible locations straight from our AWS cloud using the link at the very bottom. You'll see it says download full table from AWS S3. Anytime we update our eligible locations on the server, we automatically zip it up and put it out there for this download to be updated. So that's probably the quickest and easiest way to download the table for the entire state. And I will note that when you download this using any of our options here, even if you download it as a shapefile or GeoJSON, there is not going to be any spatial information tied to these locations. It's just going to be location IDs. Due to the FCC CostQuest licensing, we are not allowed to provide a public download of the fabric data with the spatial information tied to it. So what you'll find here is just a table of location IDs. You'll have to join that to your own local version of your fabric. And that will get you the locations that you need to map. And also in this table, I just wanted to highlight that there is a column. 4 counties have provided priority locations to us. So if you're looking at locations in one of those 4 counties, there is a field that will show the ranking that they have given us for those, and that is considered in the proposal evaluations. Next slide, please. And, as part of that response form B that Gretchen mentioned, the mapping documents that we're looking for, we have provided a template to submit locations as part of your projects. You can find that template file on the NC Broadband website, linked there on this page. Under the EBS system instructions bullet 3, there's a link that will give you a Excel template. And in that Excel template, there is 2 tabs. There's a README tab, and then there's kind of the data tab. The README tab will go through the data dictionary, explain what all the columns are and what we're looking for in each column with your submission. It will also provide some instructions on how to save the file as a CSV file. What we're looking for with your project submissions is a CSV file that just lists all of the locations that you are proposing in your project area. And the example shown here is kind of the fields that we're looking for and the field headings. So if you're submitting a data file with some file naming conventions that are suggested in the README file, this example is exactly what we need the file to look like. So we automate a lot of this, pulling all the data down and processing it and doing some validation checks. We also check to see if it's all unique location IDs. So, we don't want any duplicate locations in a project submission. So those are checked when we first pull those data files in. And we need the headers to remain the same. So, follow the instructions in the README file, and it'll make things a lot easier in the end. But all of and I will reiterate before my slides are up, but that the eligible locations, probably by the latest, it would be Wednesday of next week that the CAB planning tool and the eligible locations will be updated. We're shooting for earlier in the week, so it could be earlier. Probably Wednesday is the latest that data will be updated. Next slide. This back to you, Angie. Or Gretchen.
And this goes to Shannon.
That goes to me. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Shannon.
So for this, just to go over briefly the CAB timeline for the awards for round 2. Most of the slide has already been covered. However, we do want to just push these timelines, give you, never too many reminders, right? So response form A, again, that is the company profile form that's going to be due on January 21st. To remind everyone that must be submitted, that packet must be submitted in order for you to participate in this round of CAB. The documents that complete that packet you can find them up on the slide Gretchen presented. I think it was slide 9. And it's also listed in section 8 of the scope of work. That's the response form, the BIRD anti-lobbying, the no overdue tax forms, and then all your updated information, your financial information. And then for response form B, that is going to be your proposal response. And that is due on February 17th. Again, that's back up on slide 9 if you need to know the specific documents in that proposal. And again, also on section 8 of the scope of work. And that's your project response form, your mapping documents, your budget, your key personnel, those documentation, that documentation. And we do want to remind everyone that, we do need that full scope of work document, including the signed signature page. Do not just send us that signature page only. This February 17th deadline for all proposals is the cutoff. There's no dates, there's no staggering on those. I know we issued out the scopes of work on 2 separate days, on the 26th of November and then on the 10th, I believe, of December. Those are all due on the February 17th. And then as far as the evaluation process, so we will start evaluating this information that comes in as soon as we start receiving these company profile documents. Those will get reviewed in the financial assessments. We'll get that started and hopefully have all of those profiles done before the 17th deadline. There are 90 counties. So as you can imagine, that's going to take some time for us to go through, do all the vetting, do all the evaluation. So, having a split time where we can do all the initial stuff under response form A should be beneficial for us as well. And we're hoping to do that starting, January 22nd, start that evaluation process and go through April of this year. We are hoping to start doing awards, on a rolling basis up until that April. We hope to get all of these 90s awards contracted by April of 2025. I think that is all from me. Angie, I think it's back to you.
Thanks, Shannon. And I have a few more slides. I just, before I keep going, I just want to say thank you to and kind of recognize our team here. We have folks working really, really hard to keep all this work going. The folks here working on CAB and our mapping folks, but also our whole bio team. So I just want to recognize them for all of their hard work. Okay, and all that's coming. So the CAB evaluation process, as Shannon said, we're not sure. We have 90 procurements out. So we don't know we don't know your capacity as providers as to how many proposals we're really going to receive, but we're obviously preparing to do a lot of reviews in the coming months. So as a reminder on evaluation, so the criteria is listed in your scope of work. It's the ability of the respondent to perform. That is essentially what's in response form A, technical merits of the project, cost and scope of the project in response form B. And again, we've split them because it's going to allow us a little more time to, so you only have to do the form A one time instead of 90 or however many projects you're going to submit. And it allows us to start evaluating the first part of section A sooner. So thank you for your flexibility as we've changed the process a bit. The financial solvency review will be conducted by KPMG again, as it was in round one. We appreciate their partnership. On the technical merits, as a reminder, so it's U.S. Treasury guidance that fiber projects receive prioritization over technology types. That is still the case. This is still ARPA. That doesn't mean we won't fund fixed wireless or other technologies. It just means that's what's in the Treasury guidance. But again, we really don't know, because of the volume of procurements we have out there. We really don't know how many projects you all will submit, what types, where. So we expect a variation in what comes in this time. We will identify best value bids and award the strongest first. So when we're reviewing a county, if they've gotten 4 bids in that county, we'll identify the best value project, but then we may award more than one in a county. We would like to award as much as possible. We would like to get the rest of our money committed, the state's money committed. So additional awards after that first one may require deduplication. If so, that would take us a bit longer. But again, we would try to move as quickly as possible, and the goal is to award as much as possible as long as the projects are good, strong projects. Next slide, please. And so the kind of complex part of all this, among all the other things, is that we are now in January of 2025. As you all know, the ARPA funds do have there's both state and local fiscal recovery funds and capital project funds, 2 different types of ARPA funds that will feed into these projects. They have slightly different rules on end dates. What the scope of work says now is that project construction must be completed by December 31st, 2026. I'm reading because I want to say exactly what's in the scope. All NCDIT funds must be expended by that date. Extension requests may be considered on a case-by-case basis through the first quarter of 2027. So it's just to let you know, we would prefer to give 2-year construction periods to everyone. We obviously have to go by what's in the Treasury rules. And so for the SFRF funds, the expenditure deadline is December 31st, 2026. The final rule for that funding does not describe this as a project completion deadline. This capital project fund expenditure and construction deadline is December 31st, 2026. And the CPF guidance describes this as substantial completion of project construction. So just to let you know, we have requested an extension of both SFRF and CPF deadlines due to December 31st, 2027, due to Hurricane Helene and those impacts. We don't know how Treasury will respond. So just to say, we are looking hard at these questions, and we will keep looking hard at them, and we hope to have more answers for you before we actually contract projects. So we hope that you will apply, and then get you more. We'd like to have more detail for you before we contract. That's where we are on that topic. Next slide, please. So I think those are the main points. I did have a couple quick things to add super quickly on mapping. Only 4 counties prioritize data. Henderson, Nash, Macon, and Stanley. So as you're looking at the CAB planning tool and you're like, I don't see the expense that Ben talked about. Most of the counties don't have prioritized areas. So you're not missing them, but there was only 4 that prioritized. Another thing, Ben may have mentioned this, but I missed it. It's the broadband serviceable locations. You all submit the location IDs That's what we're looking for as far as the location count for your projects. We're not looking for the unit count. We know that unit count, that's an attribute of each BSL. And that's significant, but it's not what we're using to as kind of the foundational. We really want the BSL count for the applications themselves. And then the other mapping note is just be aware that the BEAD challenge process is totally separate from the CAB eligible location data. So it's a separate data set. We will finalize the BEAD data in the spring. And these CAB awards and those protected BSLs will be folded into the BEAD data set ultimately. But for now, they're separate. If you submitted a BEAD challenge, that has nothing to do with this CAB data set. So I think you'll know that, but just noting that. So I think, sorry.
Can I add one?
Yeah.
I also just wanted to make sure everyone knew that, when you download this data for CAB, we are in version 5 of the Fabric for this program. If you're participating in the BEAD challenge, that is in version 4 of the program. So we're kind of managing things in 2 different versions of the Fabric data set as well. So when you download the eligible locations from the tool that I demonstrated, that is going to be version 5 of the Fabric.
Thank you. And so because we weren't able to relaunch it until November, we were able to use that November FCC data, the version 5 data, availability data. So that's positive. We want to always use the most up-to-date data possible, but as you all probably know, then that we're getting a lot of different Fabric versions out there. Thanks, Ben. Is there anything else from anybody on the presenting team that we've missed or that you want to add before we go to questions? Okay. So next step, so watch for the final eligible locations early next week. Good luck with your applications. With a reminder for questions. So Shannon.Gerger@NC official contact on your scope of work. That is because it's a state procurement. We're required to have an official one-person contact. So that's Shannon. Mapping data questions go to broadbandmapping@nc.gov. Other program questions go to cabprogram@nc.gov. So I think that's all. And Crystal, I will turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Angie. So I'm going to scroll all the way back up to the top and we'll start from there. So Chris Moody asked, why should we wait until Tuesday to review the final list of locations?
So you can look at them now. I would say they're mostly up to date except for these 3,500 BSLs. So you could start planning. But yes, once the final map is done, we will put a note in the, I don't want to share my screen right now, but they're on the web page where we have the active CAB proposals posted. There's a column to update that says, the map locations are final. And so that's where you'll see that notice.
He had another question. Is the scope of work due on January 21st or February 17th?
Yeah, and if anyone else wants to jump in, I won't hoard all the questions, but the response form A is due in January. Response form B is due February 17th. Shannon, do you want to add anything?
True. Yeah, the scope of work documents, the signed scope of work document is due with response form B on the in the February 17th date.
And just to add, the scope of work is actually part of the contract, and that's why it's kind of a state procurement rule that you have to submit the whole document back, even though we obviously have a copy, because that's what you're signing off on, all of those terms and conditions.
I believe that answers Jessica's question about the signature page versus the full scope of work. So that fulfills that procurement requirement that you submit back the whole thing. She had another question about how many points are assigned to fiber projects under the priority classification.
So the evaluation is not a points-based evaluation. It's based on strengths and weaknesses. So it's not a point system.
Perfect. Okay. We have another question. If a new BSL, which is the broadband serviceable location, is added to the latest version of the fabric, a location that was not included in previous versions, and now shows as eligible in the middle of a pre-existing award area, how do you plan to address these locations to avoid duplication of efforts or overbuild?
It's a good question, Ben.
It's a very good question. I think we were thinking about this in kind of two phases. One, through the protest process, those protected areas could be submitted through a protected area challenge. If you feel that this location is part of your project area, and it's in the middle of an existing award and it's a new fabric location, those could be a protected areas challenge. We have that template as well along with our protests. And those protected area challenges can kind of come in outside of the protest window. I would submit those, but we also, when we're looking at the applications and the proposals that come in, one of the steps we plan to do is take a look at each of the proposals and the locations of that proposal in relation to past awards to kind of begin to understand if those eligible locations are kind of duplicating efforts. Is that correct, Angie?
Yeah, so I would say, Joe, we are planning to reach out to our great grantees and our counties to date on basically the crosswalk of your current projects. We can't make you all responsible for a new location that wasn't in your contract, but so that's the balance, right? But we are planning to have conversations with grantees and CAB awardees on this soon, so we will look forward to talking to you more on that.
Yeah, and I would note that this is probably more of an occurrence in great grants because those projects were defined in a different location data set, our address NC data. So we've had to crosswalk those locations using building footprints and parcels into the fabric. We've tried to do our best in capturing everything that's on that parcel or that building that's in that same project area and making that protected. But I know we do have plans to reach out to those great grant awardees to kind of have you validate what those projects look like in the fabric to make sure that we're on the same page.
Thanks, Ben. We have a question from Sharon on timing. If we submit response form B before February 17th, could the application potentially be evaluated before February 17th?
Potentially, but the issue would be we would have to still wait to see if anyone else is bidding on that county. So even if we could start reviewing your submission, we still would have to wait and see what other submissions come in. So to be honest, probably most of our resources up until February 17th will be preparing for evaluation. But you are obviously welcome to submit early if y'all are ready.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question from Jody. Without the counties having to make financial contributions, how much input do they have on which projects or providers are selected?
Yes. So Jody, we have, I think 7 counties are contributing funding in round 2. We are talking about this question right now. Our plan is to probably give the counties a set of options as to how much they want to participate or not, ranging from being evaluators, not participating at all, or having us kind of present to them our findings, our recommendations. And our challenge is really timing. And of course, we don't know what the counties, some counties want to be super involved. Some counties feel super busy and like this isn't their space. So there's a range of, I think, preferences, So we will begin talking with them probably next week on which path they would like to take.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but we have 2 more questions. Jessica asks, if the CAB program guide states that middle mile expenditures are not eligible, but what if they're supporting last mile deployments? Would it be eligible in this instance?
I believe there's wording in there around middle mile supporting last mile. I would have to go back and read through the scope, but there is a fine line, right? That yes, you have to get to the last mile. I'm sorry, I don't have the sentence in front of me, but we can add that
Jessica,
to our FAQs.
exactly. Great question. Great question. Okay, and the last question, we are right at time, so if anyone needs to drop, please do so. But Kyle writes, how do locations that have just been approved through Reconnect 5 affect the BSL showing eligible?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I don't think that we have formal information on any super recent federal awards. If any companies have been awarded something that they are able to share with us, we would, if we got it by early next week, we would add that into the map. But it's a balance on timing. So yeah, I would ask if any companies have that happening, if you could please reach out to us, that would be helpful.
Okay, that's all of our questions for today. Thank you all so much for joining and for your great questions. We appreciate them all. I've left up this screen so you can see how to contact us if you need further information on any questions you posted, or if you just have additional questions after the fact. But we will be posting this recording on our website probably early next week. But if you have any questions, just please reach out to us. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all very
Ha-
much.
Have a great day.